Is there a more empowering, more creative way to have an argument rather than arguments become destructive? In this video, I want to share 5 ways in which we can have an argument in a way that leads our relationship to grow rather than for our relationship to be destroyed and damaged and things to be said which are then regretted heavily later. So these 5 ways are things to really bear in mind. If this time you're having any struggle, any challenge in your relationship, if communication is breaking down, these will really help you to focus in and have an empowering disagreement rather than one which is destructive. Okay. The first thing I want to share is a principle I believe comes from Stephen Covey. I don't know where he got it from himself, but he shares it in the book of the 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. And this is about seeking to understand the other person before we seek to be understood ourselves. Just think about that, seeking to understand the other person's point before we ourselves try to impose our opinion on the other person. Now, what a great foundation for a conversation, because if we're open in that respect, this requires us to really want to try and understand the other person. So it takes us out of our head and into connecting with them. This is such a great foundation, great starting point. So I just wonder how you could seek to understand the other person before seeking to be understood. That's point 1. Point 2 is about being very aware of our emotional state, because if ever we get into a point of fight or flight, this is where the adrenaline is pumping, where we're in that stress response of wanting to react, where we feel our body charged with energy, ready to jump to action. This is a really, really bad sign in any conversation, and actually for any relationship. It's like the more we find ourselves in that stress response, the more challenges we're going to have in all kinds of communication, not only arguments. So here's the point. If you find yourself reacting in that way, if you feel that fight or flight, that rage, that monster coming up within you, then that is not a good time to be having the conversation. It's much better to hold back, detach, take a walk, go and do something else for a while. Don't enter into the argument if you've got that fight or flight reaction going on, because the argument isn't going to go anywhere good. Okay. The next thing is about where we're trying to win the argument. This crops up so often where we feel triggered in some way, and then we want to impose ourselves and really make a point, make the other person wrong. Well, is this coming from a good place? Is it coming from a loving, positive place that we're talking about? Or is it coming from more of a need of our ego to try and be right, to impose ourselves on the situation? Anytime that we're trying to win, we've got to remember that really as soon as we take on that attitude of winning, we've lost, because the relationship is going to be damaged through that. Because who wants to be in a relationship, whatever kind of relationship it is, where the other person is trying to make us wrong, trying to put us down? Yeah, so wherever we get into that mindset of trying to win or make the other person wrong, then that's the time to step back and to rethink where we're at. Ultimately, do we want to be happy? Do we want to have great relationships? Or do we want to be right? Do we want to be right sitting alone, lonely, unhappy, without great relationships? But being right doesn't make sense. So just think about where you're heading in that respect. The next point is really, really important. This is something that particularly men tend to get wrong, which is about acknowledging the feelings of the other person. Because sometimes that on its own is enough to defuse the whole situation. And what could have gone on to become a really big deal then gets dealt with and isn't such a big deal anymore, if we can just acknowledge the feelings of the other person. So this can apply to everyone, but particularly men need to really bear this in mind, that before we try and get onto scoring points or get into logic, making a point, then just acknowledge where the other person is coming from. It's really, really important. And the next thing, again, under the theme of not making it personal, is about making sure that we're playing the issue and not playing the person. Because if we turn a disagreement into something about the person's character, their personality, how they are, you always do this, you always get this wrong, you always take this point of view, and it becomes about the personality, then that isn't heading anywhere good either. And in the worst case, this can turn into things like name calling, blaming, can become really, really uncomfortable if we start getting to that point. Because what happens is if one person starts blaming the other side, then we find ourselves getting blamed back in return. So that's the point again. So make sure you're playing the issue, focusing on a specific instance rather than generalizing, globalizing, making about a person's character or personality. And just remember, finally, so those are the 5 things I wanted to share, but really important as well, remember that words are a bit like toothpaste. Because, the toothpaste comes out really easily. You give that tube a squeeze and the toothpaste is all over the place. And our words can be a bit like that as well. We just let them go and they're flowing, and who knows what kind of mess we're going to make. And here's the thing, can you get the toothpaste back in the tube? Well, you can try, but you normally just create an even bigger mess. And, words are a bit like that. Once they come out, they're out there and we can't really get them back in. We can apologize, we can clean up, we can try and make things better, but ultimately the damage may have already been done. So just really think and make sure that you're working on your emotional state, your focus, your clarity, because once our words are out there, they're not going to come back again very easily. So that's it. So arguments, this is the main point. Arguments can really be a way to grow together with a person, to really bond, to really know each other more deeply. But they can also be damaging if they're done in the wrong way. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. So keep smashing it. If you want to talk about any of this stuff, by the way, at the moment, during this time, Rebecca and myself have been taking lots of calls, but it may or may not be the right time to work together. But reach out, we'll get on a free call. And if any of this resonates or you want to take any of this further, get on a call and we can talk about that more. Okay, take care.